the settlement proposal was something to be expected from the Costa Rican state prior or during the preliminary hearing, which is, in my experience, the best and the proper stage to handle that. Why? Because in that case, you avoid to go to trial, which is the third stage. And you avoid the cost and all the personal things that are involved to a criminal litigation. There can be a lot of time from the preliminary hearing to trial. And during that time, there is always desgaste. It's like, how can I say? I mean, by definition, the preliminary hearing is the best way. So if there was an interest from the state, taking into account the small amount of damages claim that was included by the state, and taking into account that David Aven was what we call delincuente primario, it was the first time he was charged in the criminal branch in Costa Rica. Taking into account that also he was an American citizen, a foreigner that is not familiar with the Costa Rican proceedings, and taking into account that with all the documents that are still in that file, you can see that there was no, I think you call it intent, dolo, we call it dolo in Spanish. There were conditions enough for the Costa Rican state to seek a proper settlement at that moment, in which there was no still possibility to advance to a costly trial. And why costly? Because as you can see in the trial, in both times we spent almost 15 days of effective days. In working days were the first time like 10 and the second time around 7 days. Every day of trial costs a lot of money to the Costa Rican state. And I can say that only the first trial has consumed more than the $12,000. Around that was the amount that the Costa Rican state was claiming at that moment. So it was a matter of proportion. I mean, what is going to cost more to you? All these days of trial, in which, as the state pretended, receive 17 witnesses submitted by the prosecutor Martinez, or instead seek a settlement with a man, an old man that was also at that moment what we call adulto mayor, like an elder man, that once he has 65 years, he also deserves some little special treatment by the state, especially if he's a virginer. I mean, all the conditions were there to seek a settlement. And you have to take into account that at the end of the day, the purpose of every proceeding, either civil, labor, but especially the criminal ones, is to solve a problem. That his case was a problem to nature, and maybe the best way to solve it was at that moment, including like a plan and a remedy plan and a payment of damages. I mean, that was the proper stage, but never happened. Never happened. I mean, there was no proposal, no plan, and moreover, there were needed approvals from superiors of Mr. Martinez, that's what we understood at the moment, that were not previously consulted in order to explore the possibility of the settlement at that moment. Then we have one of the most strange experiences I had. The fact that the accused party is willing to finish the case, the fact that the accused party who has done a huge effort to face a case is now, exposed to a new trial because of a negligence of the Costa Rican state, because this is actually a negligence.
Why do you think the criminal trial has not restarted?
Well, I can say about what I did in order to have the possibility to have David back in Costa Rica to face another trial. I was the night that David was shot with him in the OIJ in San Jose. It's like the judicial police, together with Mr. Chelino, I think is the name of the other investor. They were very scared. They were very afraid. There were 6 shots in the car, and it was a shocking spectacle to see that car. So, and he has no idea where those shots come from. I mean, the shots, according to the version, were done in the road after a neighboring town to Quepos called Jaco, going to San Jose, which is it's a very lonely road. Yes. He has no idea who did that and what was the purpose. But there was always like this feeling that there was somebody strongly committed to remove David from well, physically, and from the economic point of view, his investment from Quepos. So I can understand the reaction of a person that understands that somebody that sees that the prosecution and the trial maybe did not went that well for the Costa Rican state, because it didn't go that well to the Costa Rican state the way they wanted. Maybe the best way was to kill him, Given that I coordinated, I asked two bodies. I asked the court to explore the possibility to provide specific security, policemen and policemen in the hotel security for a possible David coming. And I also asked that to the American Embassy. There is a lady there called Mrs. Silvia Cabezas. Silvia Cabezas is the head of I don't know if she still is, of the legal department or legal affairs of the American Embassy. If she may help us to get this kind of security. And the two of them just say that that was not possible to have this special security, because they see it like a special treatment, like a VIP or something treatment. It's not like that. It was a matter of a man that is a foreigner that was tried to get killed. So from that moment on, I think David desisted from the idea to return into Costa Rica, because basically there are no guarantees for his personal safety in the country, given that there was no proper response for that issue, neither from the Costa Rican state, neither from the embassy of his own country. Yes.
But just to be clear, in relation to the Costa Rican state, you made a request, I think is what you're saying.
Yes.
For police guards to be available while he returned to trial.
Yes, and there is case law, even from the Constitutional Court, that even in the cases of problem of resources, the state has to find a way to provide security and guarantee basic human rights to a person, like in this case, that was intended to be killed. I mean, David Aven he did not took a flight the day before the trial and never come back to the U.S. That's an important thing to take into account. David Aven refused to return to Costa Rica because of the shots. Otherwise, knowing him, he's a man of, how can I say, he's a brave man. Es un hombre valiente. So I more from a human way understood his decision of not coming back to the country, given the problem to his security, yes. One of the manifestaciones, one of the ways the due process is reflected, let's say, in the criminal proceeding is something that is specifically provided in our procedural criminal code, Código Procesal Penal. We call the principle of objectiveness. And according to the principle of objectiveness, the prosecutors are not only intended to go and prosecute somebody with the version of one of the parties. In this case, with the version of Mr. Buchelato, or with the version of part of the employees of one body, like SINAC. Why part? Because there's still a very strange thing that I don't understand, and that strange thing is that SINAC, the environmental administrative bodies that handle Mr. Aven's permits and requests since, let's say, 2006 or 2007 until 2010, in which all those employees and visits and reports stated that there were no environmental problems in the property, no wetlands, no forests, no nothing, basically no nothing, and relying on those reports, other more powerful in terms of scope reports were granted, like the Setena one. One day, suddenly, because of, according to me, the fear of the director of the ACOPAC, Mr., I think the name, Carlos Vinicio Cordero, appointing Mr. Luis Picado. Luis Picado changed all that technical, so-called technical criterion to suddenly state that there were wetlands and that there was a huge damage to the environment and that there were a lot of irregular things happening in the property. That things happen one day to the other. In the case of the wetlands, for instance, that things happened from August to January. So according to Picado, for instance, there can be a wetland that is born in August and it becomes a wetland in February, in 6 or 7 months before. The thing is that I still don't get the sudden change of technical criterion. I still don't get how the prosecutor didn't understood Mr. Martinez, with all due respect to him. I still don't understand why he didn't pay attention to the fact that while Mr. Aven was getting all those permits, there were specific reports from the environmental agencies from Costa Rica stating that there was no problem. So there is no intent, there is no dolo. There cannot be an intent from Mr. Aven. Why? Because it's not possible for him to represent the possibility of a crime if the bodies, the bodies entitled by the Costa Rican state to say that, said the opposite. So how, you have to be like PhD biologist or a PhD in wetlands to contradict those criterions. And it's not the case. He's a developer and he's an American citizen. He has to rely in two things: in the criterions of the environmental bodies that were consistent during 3 years, and in the criterions of the people he has hired during more than 3 years, like 6 or 7. And all those criterions met in the fact that there was no trouble. So one day, somebody, Mr. Pical, thought that there were wetlands, there were forests, and upon that only version, Mr. Martinez built a criminal case. Upon that only version, Mr. Martinez thought that there was a dolo, that there was an intention. How come? How come all those years? Are those going to be erased? Nothing that happened? There were no reports? If there is still a contradiction, because there is still a contradiction, the permits are still valid. This Costa Rican state hasn't promoted the nullification proceedings to nullify those permits. Those permits are still binding and enforced in Costa Rica. And on the other hand, you have criterions that were issued after those permits saying the opposite. So, Mr. Martinez never ever pay attention to the fact that there were permits. Mr. Martinez never ever pay attention to the fact that Mr. Aven hired experts. So, it was not my most powerful argument. My most powerful argument was the lack of intent, the lack of demonstration of the intent and the disregarding of the objectiveness principle. Yes, a more substantive issue.
And that is to take advantage of the witness's knowledge and criminal expertise. Would you describe for me, or comment rather, on the position that Costa Rica has taken that the red flag warning is automatic that was filed an Interpol against Mr. Aven?
No, it's not automatic. It's not automatic. Especially, it seems to be very strange that it's automatic for environmental crimes. No, it's not automatic.
So if it's not automatic, who makes the decision in order to flag someone at Interpol on behalf of the Costa Rica, if you know?
I guess it must be a political decision rather than a technical one.
So it would not be one of the environmental ministries, it would be someone from the Justice Ministry, you think?
I think.
Thank you, Chairman.